He immediately, in a press conference, highlighted that the domaine Lipai has been in a state of severe neglect for several years and that the historic site remains underdeveloped and abandoned. The equestrian center was also in a pitiful state with allegation of ill treatment of the horses and ponies. Mr. Deputy Speaker, such a gross mismanagement of this project occurred over the period of 2015 to 2024 under the previous government. With regards to Part A of the question, I'm informed that SIC has initiated legal proceedings to prevent Yeehai International Investment Management Limited from exercising its voting rights in respect of unpaid share capital and to restrain the sale of villas and apartments by Mr. Yeehai. On the 28th of May 2024, the State Investment Corporation obtained an interim order prohibiting and restraining Yeehai from selling or otherwise disposing of part of its assets, including apartments belonging to Yeehai. 3. Gibby's Properties Limited issued a notice of termination of the administration and management agreement on the 24th of October 2025 with effect from 30th of November 2025, requiring Yeehai to surrender possession of the stables, the horses, and the ponies. Mr. Deputy Speaker, as regards to Part B of the question, I'm informed by the Economic Development Board that a comprehensive assessment of the project has been undertaken, following which a report was forwarded to the former Deputy Prime Minister in July 2025. As per the report, there have been delays in project implementation owing to changes to the business plan, governance concerns, serious issues relating to capital contribution, and the absence of updated audited financial statements, as I said, since 2019. Mr. Deputy Speaker, in the light of the serious shortcomings identified, the most that the matter has been referred to the FCC in May 2026, the EDB is considering revoking the Smart City Scheme certificate in accordance with the applicable legal and regulatory framework. In so doing, the EDB is also taking into account the interests of the State-owned Investment Corporation after evaluating all the risks involved in the project, including financial, legal, regulatory, and investment-related risk, so as to ensure that any decision does not prejudice the interests of the State Investment Corporation. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I'm further informed by the State Investment Corporation that following allegations made to the FCC by two Chinese nationals, there exists a dispute in the financial participation of Mr. Yeehai in the shareholding of Yeehai International Investment Management Limited. The two Chinese nationals have also alleged that Mr. Yeehai is engaged in money laundering, following which the FCC has lodged a provisional charge against Mr. Yeehai. Following an application by the FCC, the Supreme Court issued a freezing order in respect of Mr. Yeehai's bank accounts and all the assets of Yeehai Investment Limited. The State Investment Corporation has additionally, in May 2026, lodged a formal complaint with the FCC against Mr. Yeehai for fraud and misappropriation of funds. The FCC is currently investigating the alleged malpractices involving Mr. Lee Lambert and Mr. Yeehai. And yet I should add, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that the same Mr. Lee Lambert was subsequently appointed as CEO of the State Bank of Mauritius by the previous government. Mr. Deputy Speaker, this is a high-profile case involving significant public assets, prime lands of government, a historical national site, gross mismanagement, dishonesty by shareholder Yeehai International Investment Management Limited, and a loss on investment.
Yes, Honorable Musique.
Je vous remercie. Est-ce que dans le cadre de l'enquête de la FCC, les autorités auraient pris contact avec les autorités chinoises pour demander quelconque assistance? Et si oui, quelles sont les retombées?
I'm not in a position to say that at this stage because the inquiry is ongoing.
Merci. Au-delà des millions qui sont dus par rapport au loyer des écuries du domaine des pailles, il y a également, si je ne me trompe pas, encore 4 poneys survivants sur les lieux. Est-ce que des actions seraient envisagées pour assurer le bien-être de l'animal, étant donné qu'ils sont dans un très mauvais état?
That is, of course, they should have done that already, if they haven't.
Okay. The Honourable Third Member for Portland South, Portland Central.
B963, please.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, the Finance Act of 2022 introduced amendments to the Civil Status Muslim Family Council Regulations 2005 to provide for the registration of Muslim religious marriages celebrated in accordance with Muslim rites other than civilly during the periods from 1st of January 1982 to 13th of November 1987 and from the 1st of December 1990 to the 21st of August 2022. Under these transitional provisions, where such marriages remain unregistered as at the 22nd of September 2022, both spouses or the surviving female spouse could apply to the Muslim Family Council for its registration, provided that the application was made not later than the 31st of December 2022. The purpose of this measure was to allow spouses through religious marriages celebrated with according to Muslim rites, other than civil marriages, during the period mentioned to make applications to the Council for the registration of the marriage, and if the marriage was registered by the Council, to qualify for the basic widow's pension. I'm informed by the Muslim Family Council that during the registration exercise, 368 applications were received. Of these, 322 were approved and certificates of registration were issued, including 109 submitted by surviving spouses. There were 46 applications which were refused for non-fulfillment of the prescribed requirements, of which 31 were submitted by surviving spouses. I'm further informed that after the expiry of the registration period on the 31st of December 2022, an additional 38 applications for registration were received from surviving spouses. As the statutory deadline has expired, those applications could not be processed. However, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I wish to inform the House that the issue of granting a further extension of the deadline for the registration of Muslim religious marriages is presently under consideration.
Yes.
Thank you, Honorable Prime Minister, for your answer. May I request you, in the event that this consideration is agreed, that adequate communique be circulated by the Muslim Family Councils so that these 38 women, as you said, can have at least their pension being paid to them in due time. And thank you for the compassion that you have shown in answering this question.
Thank you. And this will have to be communicated, yes.
The Honourable Fourth Member for Portland North and Mont Island.
Thank you. B964.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, let me be absolutely clear and unequivocal. The members of the Commission of Experts on Pension Reform have discharged their responsibilities with the utmost diligence, independence, professionalism, and integrity. I would like to reiterate what I stated in my reply to the private notice question on the 25th of June 2026. The members of the Commission are accomplished professionals who have distinguished themselves in their respective fields, both nationally and internationally. I consider it wholly unfair and unjustified that the members of the Commission should be blamed for decisions announced in the budget speech relating to pension reform. Their role has been to provide independent expert advice and recommendations. It is therefore neither appropriate nor fair to attribute to the Commission the policy decisions contained in the budget speech. Thus, the question of revoking the appointment does not arise. In fact, Mr. Deputy Speaker, members of the Commissions have been appointed for a period of 18 months, as from October 2025, with clear terms of reference in consultation with the World Bank and the IMF and approved by Cabinet in September 2025. The Commission was mandated to examine the three pillars of the pension system, namely, one, the basic non-contributory pensions, in particular basic retirement pension, two, the contributory pension schemes, and three, the voluntary private pensions, including personal retirement savings plans and occupational pension schemes offered by employers. After only 8 months, Mr. Deputy Speaker, 8 months of intense consultations and deliberations, the Commission submitted its interim report in May 2026 in line with its terms of reference. This report was presented on the 20th of May 2026 to the Steering Committee on Pension Reform, chaired by myself and comprising the then Deputy Prime Minister, the Minister of Agro-Industry, Food Security, Blue Economy and Fisheries, the Minister of Social Integration, Social Security and National Solidarity, the Minister of Financial Services and Economic Planning, the Minister of Labour and Industrial Relations, the Minister of Industry, SMEs and Cooperatives, the Junior Minister of Finance, the Junior Minister of Social Integration, Social Security and National Solidarity. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I must emphasize that members of the Steering Committee made a number of comments and suggestions which was taken on board by the Commission. There was broad consensus from members of the Steering Committee on the direction of the reforms. Mr. Deputy Speaker, due to the urgency of the fiscal situation, especially the still very high level of public debt, estimated at 87.7% of GDP as of June of this year, and given that the Commission had completed its analysis and recommendations on the first pillar of the pensions system, in particular the basic retirement pension, government decided to act immediately on the policy recommended by the Commission in its interim report. To facilitate the implementation of this reform, we are setting up, as recommended by the Commission, a unified independent pensions regulatory authority to regulate the entire pension system, and a central pensions administration bureau which will regroup all state-sponsored schemes into one place to digitalize and facilitate service to members and pensioners. Mr. Deputy Speaker, the Commission has still approximately 9 months remaining to submit its final report, in particular on Pillar 2 and 3 of our pension system. In addition to its substantive findings and recommendations contained in the interim report, the Commission is expected to set out the modalities and implementation roadmap required to give effect to the recommendations. Specifically, the final report will provide guidance on the legislative, administrative, and institutional measures necessary to implement those recommendations, including a comprehensive review of the legislative framework governing pensions and retirement benefits, including the Pensions Act, the Statutory Bodies Pension Funds Act, the Workers' Rights Portable Retirement Gratuity Fund, the regulations of 2020, the National Pensions Act, the National Savings Fund Act, the Pension President's Emoluments and Pension Act, the National Assembly Retiring Allowances Act, and the Social Contribution and Social Benefits Act. B, the setting up of the National Pensions and Provident Fund. C, the appropriate mechanism to be put in place for managing and investing the funds under the National Pensions and Provident Fund. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I wish to emphasize that the reform of Pillar 2 and Pillar 3 of the pension system, that is, I mentioned earlier, that is the contributory pension schemes and the voluntary private schemes are not yet finalized. In particular, the establishment of the National Pensions and Provident Fund and the modalities will have to be worked out. The implementation will require dedicated legislation, extensive consultations with stakeholders, and also guidance from the proposed Independent Pensions Regulatory Authority. The future of the Portable Retirement Gratuity Fund, as well as the National Savings Fund, will also be carefully considered, taking into account both the short and long-term interests of the workers. Subject to Cabinet approval, the necessary legislation is expected to be introduced before the end of the financial year 2026-2027. I also wish to assure the House that the proposed reforms will not leave any worker worse off. On the contrary, every worker will have an individual dedicated account, similar to the arrangements that existed under the National Pensions Fund. And furthermore, the reforms will not result in any increase in contribution rates for either employees or employers. The CSG contributions that are currently credited into the consolidated fund will be progressively redirected to workers' individual accounts. Mr. Deputy Speaker, all these reforms are being done in the wider interest of workers and to protect their future earnings after their retirement. Coming back to the question of the Commission has been entrusted with a mandate of significant national importance, and government has every confidence in the expertise, independence, and professionalism of its members to discharge that responsibility. Accordingly, I wish to reiterate that the question of revoking the appointment of the members of the Commission does not arise. I have requested them to continue the important work entrusted to them and to complete the mandate by submitting the final report. Mr. Deputy Speaker, it is clear that with the reform of the pension system, as the responsible government, we have not chosen the easy way out and to try to get political mileage, but rather our objective is to save the system, to ensure that all the elderly obtain a pension in future and that the future generation is not burdened with an unsustainable pension system.
Yes, question?
Yeah.
No, no, come.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, may I ask the Honourable Prime Minister whether he doesn't find that the Commission has acted outside of the mandate, conferred by the supreme authority of the executive, that is Cabinet, which decided in September, in fact, the 26th of September, to set up a steering committee which shall provide guidance to the Commission, but the most important, which shall assess and act upon the recommendation of the Commission. Yet, according to the reply of the Honourable Prime Minister last week, it is clear that a presentation was made to the steering committee, questions were raised, but the final report was never assessed and acted upon by the steering committee. Therefore, does he not find now that it has acted outside of its mandate?
No, not at all, Mr. Deputy Speaker, not at all. I thought I explained that there were three pillars for that the Commissioner was mandated to examine. Three pillars. One was the basic non-contributory pensions, in particular the basic retirement pension. The second pillar was the contributory pension scheme, and the third was the voluntary private pensions, which included private savings, retirement savings plans, and occupational pension schemes offered by employers. For the first pillar, they've already done the work. That is why the committee, it was urgent, because as you know what the debt is. So it was urgent to do something about it. We don't wait for another 9 months.
Honourable Leader of Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Sir, Honourable Prime Minister, I raised the issue of possible conflict of interest last time. Can I ask you whether you're aware that one of the members of that commission has recently obtained a contract for consultancy services by the Ministry of Finance itself?
Not aware. What consultancy services are you referring to?
It is a consultant for investment advisory services to the National Pension Fund and National Saving Funds Investment Committee.
I'm not aware that he's been given a particular task to advise on this. He's advising generally.
Last question.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I must reiterate, whether the question was urgent or not, it doesn't matter. Cabinet had laid down the modalities.
Okay,
And
put your
these-
question.
No, my question is coming. And this has been, in fact, reaffirmed by the Minister of Social Security himself. In his press conference, he said, and I quote, he said, nous ne pose, c'est une question là, whether he will agree with that statement. Nous ne pose question, il est là supposé de nous, comme a dit, une version chiffrée, exactement qui peut proposer, et supposé de nous un interim report. Mais nous pas une interim report là, jamais. OK? Et le interim report, moi pas connais qui n'est arrivé, il soumet au Premier ministre, et c'est ça qui fait une rente dans le budget. Therefore, does he not, in light of what I have quoted from the cabinet decision, the modalities to assess and to act upon, does he not find here that this has been blatantly disregarded?
It hasn't been. What has happened is that the interim report was shown to all the members of the steering committee in the way of slides, not a report itself, but a way of slides. The time was urgent. We have to act. We had the interim report. We decided to go ahead. The two other pillars, as I said, are not yet ready.
Okay.
I speak to him every day.
The table, honourable member, the table has been advised that the following PQs have been withdrawn. B969, 972, 975, 973, 974, 977, 971, 968, 967. Question. Time is over. Honourable Member, the table that B1007 will be replied by the Honourable Minister of Local Government. The Honourable Fourth Member for Vodic, Honourable Edouard.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, B978.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, with your permission, I shall reply to Parliament question B978 and B980 together, as they relate to the same subject matter. I'm informed that an unfortunate accident occurred during the Mauritius National Road Cycling Championship held on Sunday, 28 June 2026 at approximately 8:50 hours, involving cyclists M.L. on a bend near Chaché Talu before Midland Village. I'm further informed that the circumstances surrounding the accident are currently under investigation by the Mauritius Police Force. The inquiry has not yet been completed, and it would be not appropriate for me to comment further. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I'm informed that the response by the Sick Care ambulance, which was providing medical cover for the event, was immediate. First aid was administered to the injured cyclist, and the scene before he was transported to Sick Care Hospital for emergency treatment. However, due to the prohibitive cost of treatment, the president of the Mauritius Cycling Federation called me, and following my personal intervention on the same day, arrangement was made for Mr. L to be transferred to Victoria Hospital, where he is currently receiving specialized medical care. I wish to inform the House that my ministry and the Mauritius Cycling Federation have remained in close contact with the family of Mr. L, as well as with the medical team overseeing his treatment, in order to monitor his condition and extend all possible support. I'm informed that his condition is currently stable and that he is awaiting further surgical procedures. I personally paid him a visit and met with his mother, where I assure her of my personal support and that of my ministry. My ministry acted promptly and immediately on the next day of the event. We requested a full report about the incident. A copy of the report from the Federation is being tabled. Mr. Speaker, sir, with regard to the safety measure and security protocols in place for the event, I'm informed by the Mauritius Cycling Federation that the following protocols, which are in accordance with the Union Cycliste Internationale guidelines for organizing of cycling events, were in place. Prior to the event, approval of the race route by the Mauritius Police Force and appointment of Union Cycliste Internationale commissioners to supervise the competition and ensure compliance with the applicable UCI regulation. During the event, an official light vehicle positioned ahead of the leading group of each race, fitted with a "Beware Cycle Race" warning sign and a flashing beacon to alert motorists. An ambulance accompanying the race throughout the event to provide immediate medical assistance whenever required. 8 police motorcycle escorts, 9 police officers deployed at strategic location and major intersection along the route, 1 private motorcycle assisting with race security and communication, 13 trained race marshal position along the course to assist with traffic management and rider safety, security barriers installed at the finish area to protect riders, officials, and spectators, and an official race convoy comprising lead and support vehicle. While the Mauritius Cycling Federation considers that comprehensive safety arrangement has been put in place, it is also recognizes that road cycling, by its nature, carries inherent risks, particularly when competitions are conducted on public roads. The Federation has also pointed out that even where roads are temporarily closed, it is not possible to eliminate all risks entirely. Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, notwithstanding the above, this unfortunate incident called for a thorough assessment of the existing framework governing road cycling competition. Accordingly, my ministry will engage in consultation with the Mauritius Cycling Federation, the Mauritius Police Force, and all other relevant stakeholders with a view to reviewing and, where necessary, strengthening the existing safety and regulatory framework. Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, I also wish to assure the House that my ministry and the Mauritius Cycling Federation are working closely together to identify appropriate means of supporting Mr. L and his family during this difficult period. The Mauritius Cycling Federation has approved the organization of a fundraising campaign in support to the family. In addition, I'm informed that Mr. L is covered under the Federation Insurance Program, which includes employer's liability, group personal accident, and public liability insurance. Furthermore, at the level of my ministry, we have the Athlete Welfare Scheme. The case of Mr. L for any assistance deemed appropriate in accordance with the applicable provision is being considered. This scheme has already assisted various athletes in the past. My thought, and I am sure those of the whole House, are with Mr. L and his family, and I sincerely wish him a full speedy recovery.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir. May I ask the Honourable Minister if he will consider the construction of a velodrome to house cycling competitions in the future?
Bear with me. Oh, sorry. Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, consideration may be given for the construction of a velodrome for training purposes, as well as for indoor cycling competition, but it would not suitable for road races. A velodrome may be used as a complement to road cycling rather than a replacement. Many elite cyclists train on the track because it develops speed, bike control, and fitness that transfer well to the road, but they still spend significant time training on roads to prepare for the specific demand of road racing.
Honorable Third Member for.
Merci, Monsieur le Vice-président. L'honorable ministre est-il au courant que la police, ce jour-là, contrôlait la circulation uniquement pour la tête de la course, c'est-à-dire le peloton de tête, et non pour les coureurs qui étaient détachés, comme c'est le cas pour le malheureux cycliste ML. Donc, dans ce contexte, l'honorable ministre peut-il dire à la Chambre quelles conditions et mesures son ministère compte imposer aux fédérations, pas uniquement la fédération de cyclistes, qui organise des compétitions sur route afin de mieux protéger la vie des sportifs mauriciens et étrangers.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, like I said in my reply, inspection and proposed race route by Federation official, identification of potential safety risks and implementation of appropriate mitigation measures, submission of the race route and operational plan to the Commissioner of Police for approval. These details has already been worked out with the police force. So if we have to work together with the Federation for further, like I said in my reply, for further measures to be taken, I will do so.
Honorable Madam.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy, sir. Can the Honorable Minister give us more details on the athlete welfare scheme he mentioned? Thank you. The athlete welfare scheme. Can I have more detail, please? Thank you.
It's a long list. If I can table it, I will table it.
Okay, one last question, Honorable.
I ask the Honourable Minister
Edouard.
if the athlete welfare scheme is extended to athlete in Mauritius.
Of course, it is included in the welfare scheme.
Okay, because your question has been replied. One last question.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, l'honorable ministre est-il au courant que les frais de clinique du cycliste dépassent les 100 000 roupies et que le cycliste n'est couvert que par une assurance à hauteur de 25 000 roupies? Il a dit lui-même qu'il y a un scheme qui pourrait éventuellement couvrir les frais. Je lui demande, ici dans cette chambre, est-ce qu'il prend l'engagement au niveau de son ministère d'aider le cycliste à régler cette note?
Effectively, the government has increased the budget for the Federation, and we are working on it.
Honorable Fourth Member for Port Resource and Port Mauradio.
B979.
I thank the honourable member for this question, but I'm afraid to say that the honourable member might have got the facts wrong in his question. First, the difference in life expectancy at birth between males and females, which I presume is what the honourable member is referring to, is not 6.8 years. Second, it is not appropriate to use life expectancy at birth to calculate the actuarial reduction factor. And third, we cannot have differentiated actuarial reduction factor, one for males and one for females. Let me get the facts straight. First, with regard to life expectancy at birth, according to the latest figures from Statistics Mauritius for year 2025 provided by the Ministry of Finance, the difference in life expectancy at birth between males and females was 7.3 years and not 6.8 years as stated by the honourable member. I'm tabling the latest statistic provided by Statistics Mauritius and Ministry of Finance. Second, for the purpose of pension, it is more appropriate to use expectancy at age 60 instead of life expectancy at birth. According to Statistics Mauritius, the difference in life expectancy at age 60 between males and females was 4.1 years in 2025. I'm tabling the latest statistic from Statistics Mauritius provided by the Ministry of Finance. Third, in determining the actuarial reduction factor, it is a standard international practice not to differentiate between males and females. The actual reduction factor is therefore based on the average life expectancy at age 60 and assumption as to investment yields. This principle is already enshrined in law under the 8th schedule to the National Pension Funds Act, which provide for the application of a monthly actuarial reduction of 0.45%. I'm informed that the Commission has recalculated the actuarial reduction factor at 0.5% per month based on new demographic data available. The proposed reduced state age pension in the budget is based on the same principles as the basic retirement pension. It is universal, non-contributory, that is payable to all eligible persons, regardless of whether they are men or women. Moreover, although women generally live longer than men, government does not consider it appropriate to apply different reduction rates based on gender. The reduced state age pension is designed to treat all eligible persons equally, so the same reduction rates will apply. Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir.
Yes, Mr. Deputy Speaker, for the record, I was quoting from the available figures of last year. That being the case, does the Minister agree then that the average life expectancy of a man is 70 years old? You can round it up here, it's 70.6. And that therefore, under the state age pension, if he takes his pension at 60 for the amount of 11,589, he will earn 400,000 more than if he takes it at 65 at the quantum of 16,555. Therefore, we can then agree, does he not agree, that all males will take their pension at 60? Is that something that we can agree on?
I've already stated the stand of the government, and we don't intend to differentiate between male and female on gender basis. Secondly, all the issue of reduced pension age is being examined by a Cabinet Economic Committee, which has been set up by the Cabinet last Friday. It will meet under the chairmanship of the Prime Minister this Wednesday to inter alia and study all the adjustment necessary, if necessary, in relation to the reduced SAP, following the decision of the government not to go ahead with the means test of the initially proposed SAP.
Right. May I ask the Honourable Minister, secondly, with regards to the women, it is the same thing. When you look at what they stand to gain over the 18 years and what they stand to gain if they take it at 65 over 13 years, it is marginally different. Therefore, once we've established that, I will ask the Minister, in fact, the state age pension as it stands, is it not the case that while a 30% increase was promised by him to 20